Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight we continue our journey through book 6 of the Analects. This evening we'll be covering chapters 4, 5, and 6. To get started, James, will you do the honors and read, I believe, the Leggy version? Is that correct?
Okay, for number 4. Ji being employed on a mission to Qi, the disciple Ran requested grain for his mother. The master said, "Give her a food." Ran requested more. "Give her a yu," said the master. Ran gave her 5 bing. The master said, when she was proceeding to Qi, when Qi was proceeding to Qi, he had fat horses to his carriage and wore light furs. I have heard that a superior man helps the distressed, but does not add to the wealth of the rich. Number 5. Yuan Si, being made governor of the town by the master, he gave him 900 measures of grain, and Zi declined them. The master said, "Do not decline them. May you not give them away in the neighborhoods, hamlets, and towns and villages." Number 6. The master, speaking of Zhanggang, said, "In the calf of a brindled cow, if the calf of a brindled cow be red and horned, although men may not wish to use it, would the spirits of the mountains and rivers put it aside?"
Thank you, James.
You're welcome.
Aman, would you like to read?
Absolutely. I've been talking all day, so bear with me. Book 6, verse 4, DC Lao. Grain for the mother of Su Hoi, who was away on a mission to Qi. The master said, "Give her 1 fu." Zhang Zi asked for more. "Give her 1 yu." Zhang Zi gave her 5 ping of grain. The master said, She went off to Qi, drawn by well-fed horses and wearing light furs. I have heard it said, a gentleman gives to help the needy and not to maintain the rich in style. Verse 5. On becoming his steward, Yuan Si was given 900 measures of grain, which he declined. The master said, "Can you not find a use for it in helping the people in your neighborhood?" Verse 6. The master said of Chuanggong, should a bull born of plow cattle have a surreal coat and well-formed horns, would the spirits of the mountains and rivers allow it to be passed over, even if we felt it was not good enough to be used?
Thank you, Aman and James.
Okay.
Jason, would you like to go ahead and...
Okay, so I assume you see the screen. Okay. So 6.4 and 6.5 both related to money. Let's put it this way. Okay. So read it. Okay. So the name is confusing. Okay. So here deal with 2 people, right? One is Zihua. Okay. So who is Chi? Okay. Remember on the previous book, Confucius said he's good at the administration. Okay. In the southern chariot state, he can manage, administrate. So that's Zihua and also Chi. Okay. So he is being sent as a diplomatic mission to the state of Qi. That's the neighboring state next to north of state Lu, which is Confucius' state. And Ran Zi, here's the person called Mr. Ran, okay, who is the name also called Qiu, Ran Qiu, okay? So it's also talk about him is, oh no, I'm sorry. Zihua is good, Ci is good at diplomatic. Remember he talked about you can wear the nice clothes, sit in the court and talk to the foreigner, okay? So that's the Zihua, he's good at the diplomatic skill. And the Ran Zi, who is Qiu, and he is good at administration. So he is very close with Mr. Ran, is very close with Confucius. So he probably managed the money for Confucius. He kind of his finance, okay? The accountant doing his accounting, the house, some rich people, right? They have the house, home office, and they have some people manage your money. So I think it's Mr. Ran, okay, or Qiu, probably this kind of person. He managed Confucius' money. So the story is this: Zihua was sent on a diplomatic mission to the state of Qi, and Mr. Ran, okay, called Ran Zi, requested some grant for his mother during his absence. So since Zihua is going away and his mother stay in state of Du, and the Confucius student or finance assistant tell Confucius, okay, since Zihua is away, let's give his mother some money, okay, so she can survive. So the master said, give her 6 measures of grain, so-called fu, okay. So probably, I'm not very sure, but I check, probably worth about 1 month living, something like this. Okay, so give 6 measures of grain. And Mr. Rans asked for more. He thinks that's enough, not enough. So Confucius said, give her 16 measures. Okay, so that means up to 2-3 months. Okay, so we call you. Actually, Mr. Ran gave 800 measures. Okay, so that means give the whole years, okay, of the expense for Zihua's mother. Then the master said, when Ci, which is Zihua, traveled to the state of Qi, he had nice horses in his carriage and well-light furs. I heard it said, that's the maxim, the people said, a Junzi help the needy, not enrich the wealthy. So Confucius sounds very stingy, okay? Doesn't want to give too much money or too many measures of grain to Zihua's mother. But Confucius' point is he is rich already, so and he ride on the carriage with nice horses and wear the very light furs. So he is rich. So we don't have to give money to his mother, because Junzi help the needy, not enrich the wealthy. So that's the story. 6.5. Still another person, Yuan Si, that's the first time, and his name also Xian. Okay, so when we go to book 14, which the title is Xian-esque, okay, that's the title. Okay, just like this chapter, this book, book 6 is Yong Ye, so-called Yong. Okay, that's talking about Zhong Gong. Okay, so Yuan Si is another student. He was poor. Okay, so the background is Yuan Si is a poor, unlike Zihua. Zihua is rich. Okay, so Yuan Si worked as Confucius administrators. Okay, during this time, Confucius was employed. So Confucius can hire an administrator. So Confucius hired his student Yuan Si, and Confucius offered to pay him 900 measures of grain. Okay, he declined. He thinks too much. Then master said, no. Can you give them to your neighbors and the people in your hometown? So this one, the chapter 5 and chapter 4, it's just the contrast, right? Zihua is the rich student. Confucius doesn't think he should give him too much. But Yuan Si is a poor. Okay, so Confucius are willing to give him more than he needed, so he can, the rest he can help his neighbor and people in his hometown. Chapter 6. This person is Zhong Gong. Okay, Zhong Gong is on the very first chapter, right? The Yong, okay, you can sit face south, right? That's the person. And also, Zhong Gong also ask about the Zhisang Zibo, the Taoist sage. Okay, chapter 1 and chapter 2. Okay, here's talk about Zhong Gong's upbringing. Zhong Gong also grew up in a poor family. So he said, the master, speaking of Zhong Gong, said, if the calf of walking ox has a sorrow hairs and a fine horn, although one may not wish to use it, will the spirits of mountains and river put it aside? So basically, it's talking about his poor upbringing, and probably his father is, uneducated. I don't know, So, but if he's good, we still can use him. So he used the sacrifice ox as an example. If he looks good, we don't care. His father is a walking ox or not. So that's Confucius. So all these three is Confucius' comment on his disciple.
Thank you for sharing. Aman, would you like to comment on any of these verses?
Just as sort of an overview, what you get in these chapters is Confucius discussion surrounding the idea of resource allocation, giving to whom you should, how much, and for what purpose, really. The theme between them all is if the resources are put to their best use, then whether it is considered too much or not enough is immaterial relative to, is it sufficient to the ends you're seeking? So in that verse 4, he's talking about giving grain to a wealthy woman. And at first it's give her enough that she'll be happy. And when he asks for more, he's okay, fine, give her more than that. But when it's egregious, then it becomes something that somebody is going to get chided for. When somebody of humble upbringings is offered riches and is basically, no, I have no need for that much, his response is to say, can't you find a use for that much? And that kind of culminates in this idea of putting an oxen to work that you would otherwise overlook. And not to delve too deeply on the details, but the oxen he's describing would be an ox that one might overlook, but the heaven and earth, the spirits of the rivers and forests, won't overlook this creature because they see its potential, they see its real value and use. And he's extolling his students to be like that, see where there is value and use into whatever resources come your way and use them accordingly, not in too great a measure, not in too little a measure, not for out of a sense of humility, and certainly not out of a sense of greed. It does make me think Confucius would have had an argument with the notion of keeping someone in the lifestyle to which they've become accustomed, that should never be the final measure of what is the proper amount for one to take.
Thank you, Aman. Anybody feel free to go ahead and hear some background noise there, and I don't know where that exactly came from. Sounded like a cell phone, but in any case, Quan, you have your hand up, and everyone feel free to type exclamation point in the chat to share your takeaways from chapters 4, 5, and 6 of book 6. Quan.
Okay, so I would like to go back to the verse concerning Zhongkong 6.6. Confucius is remembered essentially for three things, but I think that the first things that he's remembered for is that he opened the education for everyone, because let's not forget, against the historical context, at his time, what I would call the gentry, meaning the shu class, the gentleman class, was the members of the minor branches of the high nobility. And since those members of the minor branches of the high nobility didn't have any revenue from manors or from farms, they needed to learn what was called the 6 arts, okay? Mathematics, calligraphy, chess, playing an instrument, driving a chariot, and knowing how to wield a sword and a spear. So being so prepared, they would be capable to serve the state and the court. But Confucius was truly original in the sense that he opened that aristocratic curriculum to everyone that would be willing to bring him, I think, some pieces of meat, which is a quite reasonable tuition, if I may say so, for the time. So, and from that moment, Chinese civilization took another course, because it was the beginning of the so-called meritocratic system for the next centuries and persisting till today. Because the other endeavor for which he is remembered is his political failure, okay? Because he tried to reform the society by trying to influence the princes of the time, but unfortunately, his endeavor on that dimension is quite pitiful, because they were all failures. And the last one is to restore the civilization of the Zhou King. And I would say that that last endeavor is linked to the first one, meaning opening the aristocratic education for all, because nowadays the ideal gentleman in China is still defined by the Confucian gentleman, which is ultimately the creation of the Zhou royal house for China.
Thank you very much, Quan, for that background. Very, very, very interesting, actually. As to, does anybody wish to comment on the educational system that was set up from Confucius, and specifically this trading for meat in order for as form of tuition? Mostly I'm talking about the accessibility that Confucius provided to democratizing education, and what are maybe some of the costs that came along with that, in addition to you're getting an education, but are you also being taught to live a certain way as well? In addition to that, Aman.
I think that was absolutely astutely put, though I do question whether it was spear or archery that was the 5th lesson of the noble class. However, I'm that's minutia. Suffice to say, Quan is absolutely right about this transition that was happening out of aristocratic hands into the hands of, you could call them technocrats, people with expertise in doing something and not born to their station. China existed in a tension for a very long time between the idea of inherited aristocratic merit and the merit of those capable just by action, deed, or learning. And there was this very famous story of the Duke of Zhou that would be familiar to Confucius, that was, ubiquitous to the Chinese of the time, that the Duke of Zhou was in a position where he basically took the reins of power away from the Sui dynasty that preceded him. And instead of maintaining those reins of power as his own, stewarded the job of running the ship of state until the young princeling came of age and turned over the empire's control in his hands. In that story, you have this tension sort of encapsulated between the meritocracy and the aristocracy. And this was seen as a compromise that sort of satisfied both urges to still have this inherited line of aristocracy, but also seeing someone's meritorious character as being able to elevate them to as high a station as possible, nearly that of emperor, but their virtue of character being such that they would never try and usurp that position. Confucius took that story and seemed to apply it writ large to everyone, to say everyone has this potentiality to be as noble as the Duke of Zhou, because that was something not inherited, that was something that he developed as a character. Not everyone will be born an aristocrat who can ascend to, you know, the level of being emperor, but everyone can ascend to that degree of character development and true nobility to his mind. So making education available to anyone regardless of station, regardless of place in birth, was revolutionary. I don't think it quite caught on quite as well until many centuries later. That tension always existed. It was brought to the forefront with Confucianism, and then it had an ebb and flow. The Imperial Exams were used during the Han Dynasty, but they were not a very big component of the Han Dynasty. It wasn't until you get later into, well, the Song Dynasty, really, the Southern Song in particular, that being more Chinese than thou really became paramountly important. And then the Imperial Exams and this sort of meritocratic power or slant in the Chinese culture really gets ahead of steam, and it never really turned back away from it from that point on. But there was always an aristocratic class, and I don't want to say Confucius sneered at it, but he sneered at it as being the only means available of obtaining nobility.
Yeah. Well, Confucius himself was an aristocrat, so he was a bit ashamed that some of his peers were complete idiots. So he tried to change that state.
Very interesting, especially the institution of meritocracy within this framework. I want to explore that a little bit further. But James, please.
Yeah, number 5, I just comment on American politics. Number 5 reminds me a little bit of the Republican governors that send back the federal funds. Somebody refused the COVID funds when they were, I think it was Alabama, one of the states with the very highest rates. They refused the federal funds for COVID, and somebody, I think it was Mississippi, just refused the funds for housing. Although they say they are going to use the funds that they have, they're going to pay the housing. But somebody made the comment that this is just basically income. We should be giving income to people. So that's the idea of the grain. The grain is like for a rainy day. If you have a farming community, you keep a silo of grain just for the inhabitants of the hamlets and villages. And apparently this official wasn't very aware of that idea. He just thought he was getting the grain so that he could have bigger parties, or, you know, for himself. But no, it's not for that. It's for, you might need it for the people. Thank you.
How does I do want to talk about this a little bit more. What is like Confucius actually saying about our obligations to each other financially, specifically, like throughout the Analects? But let Kevin make his comments first. But I just like to put that question out there to anybody that may know the answer to that. I mean, Amon has kind of alluded to that already, kind of explained part of that, but if we could just maybe explore that a little bit further. And I want to also come back again to the idea of a meritocracy. But Kevin, please.
Thank you, Jules. Actually, for each got a question for 6-4 about one is why is for diplomatic overseas. So what's the motivation for Mr. Zhang going to help his mother? Which I assume if proper way, the government should be help a little bit for the mom. That's why Confucius, he would say that not help the wealthy. She cannot help herself. Why initially they give the Mr. Zhang, give the help to his friend or the Zihua's mother. That's question for 6-4. 6-5 is yeah, it's was 6-5 make me thinking what Confucius saw. He's not make money. What's not right? So where's the money come from? Let's offer you 900 measure of grains. Then if you don't want, you can give to your neighbor and friends, your hometown. So that's quite where's the money come from? For 6.6 is that one little bit. It's like if this person is not that good, if the family not that good, if this person is okay, we're gonna help her along. That's I'm understand correct. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Yeah, please. Yeah,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
I think that's very interesting question, and I think first about the finance. Okay,
Okay.
so I'm not very sure, but but until I'm sure is whenever we read this one talk about grain, that's the money, right? Because for 1,000 years, or I think for the next 2,000 years until Qing Dynasty, even in Song Dynasty, I know people still use how much grain as your salary. If you get a high position, you have a lot of grain. But actually, you don't just carry that grain home, but basically that's kind of currency. So that's the first thing. And Kevin's question, so I think that during that time, and somebody can correct me if you know the historic background, that's based my understanding. Sorry, Confucius, he also is a low-ranking aristocrat, right? So he has his own income from his field, all right? The town, I don't know, the people grow the grain belong to Confucius, the Kong family. So he already has his own income. So he doesn't have to worry about his finance problem. So when you work, during that time, I'm not sure, I don't think the government give you money or the more grain as your salary, unless you has no, you are not inherit from your family. So kind of like working for government is your responsibility. So for example, like 6.4, Zihua was sent to the state of Qi. That's on his own coast, right? You can imagine today, the US government sent somebody to be a diplomat. Actually, I heard the French embassy, okay, ambassador actually on his own coast. Okay, government didn't pay him, okay, French, okay, the ambassador. Okay, so just like this situation, you have to go and on your own, that's your job. I think today is still true in America. The French ambassador on still on his own cost, on expense. So I think that's the situation. So Zihua went to stay on Qi. So his mother stayed in the hometown. So Mr. Ran worry about. So in this case, Confucius should give his mother something to survive. I think that's the background of this. And then 6.5, Yuan Shi is not aristocrat. Okay, so he has no income from his title. So in this case, he worked for Confucius. Confucius has to give him some money. So Confucius decided to give him more than he need. So that's, I think it's 6.4 and 6.5 show the contrast, right? If you only read the chapter 4, you think Confucius is so stingy, doesn't want to give people more money. But 6.5, you can see Confucius are willing to give the student, the poor student, more than he need or he deserve it. And the 6.6, then again, talk about the 重工, okay, so also the low bringing, and then I think here it's just related to what Quan talked about, the Confucius revolutionary idea, right? You don't look at the people on his upbringing, his blood. You're looking at the meritocracy, from the aristocratic merit to meritocratic merit. So that's the change. So I hope I make it clear.
Very clear. Thank you, Jason. Let me see if I have any other. Oh, that Jason. Yeah. Go ahead, Aman, please.
So talking about this idea of wealth distribution, I had to do a little bit of looking, and I cannot absolutely swear to this, but it stands to reason. Confucius talked a great deal about a system of agriculture that was popular during the Zhou dynasty called the well-filled system. I will put these characters in here real quick for everybody to see. It's actually interesting just to compare and contrast the two. The first character, and I'm doing it quickly, is the character for field or farm. The second one is a well. And you can almost see how the second one looks like a tic-tac-toe board, where you could almost picture a farm in each of those individual boxes. The well-filled system was spoken of during the Zhou dynasty as the perfect means of resource allocation amongst an agricultural society. All the boxes around the center of that well would be farmed by the individuals, and the center one would go to the landholder or the gentry or the aristocrat who owned the field. And this micro model would then scale up to the macro model for everyone. So you worked for yourself, but you also worked for whoever was the landlord or tenant holder of the land in which you worked. So when Jason was saying that the Kong family were aristocrats, they would have some of these likely within their possession that were worked for them, and a small amount would probably be remitted to Confucius and his family. Though his travels and his low level of aristocracy means that he probably was living at subsistence levels. His students would bring their resources into his school, and as Quan was saying, as tuition for their education. Nominally, it was donate some meat, donate something small for the tuition, but then they would remain in his institution, remain in his tutelage, and their resources they would hand over to their master as readily as they could. In fact, they'd kind of fall over themselves to try and give to the master sufficiently what they thought he was owed. And Confucius was not above keeping up heirs. That was important. He was an aristocrat. That meant he had to dress a certain way. He had to sit a certain way. He had to travel a certain way. He had to eat a certain way. And his remittance and or whatever they gave him needed to be enough to sustain that. But he did have a sense of, there is a point where you're just gilding the lily. You don't need more than this. I'm only a low-level aristocrat, so as long as I have my sedan, as long as I have my proper robes, as long as I have my proper, accoutrements, that's all the more I need. The sort of unchecked avarice that he saw amongst his peers was the other half of what Quan was saying. He really had a hard time with his peers for their stupidity. As much as he had a hard time with them for that, he had a real distaste for their avarice, for their unchecked greed that caused them to live far above their station, or to pursue living far above their station. And he saw that as one of the signs of the smallest of men, which is what I think that Shaoran is all about, the small man, as opposed to a, Jiren, a virtuous man.
It's interesting because he's still, well, this idea of he was still kind of obviously focused on from what we've just discussed here right now, focused on people giving back and not having too much, but there definitely was to seeming like to hold the hierarchy in place. There was still like that he was still focused on making sure that people were, not only that hierarchy was in place, but the rituals were being followed by that hierarchy, so that there was this structure that he was maintaining. What did getting educated by Confucius actually get you? Did that enable you a better life?
Eventually, it led to enduring lifelong fame for some, not for everyone. But it was this, the names we know in Chinese thought were students of Confucius, whether directly or 2 generations removed, 6 generations removed, 8 generations removed. They all will look back to him as, this was the master teacher. This was the person who taught us how to even learn and how to even teach.
I would like to add something to that. Many, a meaningful fraction of Confucius students were from the high nobility, okay? Because the scions of those noble houses need to learn the basic education for young gentlemen, and at the center of that is etiquette, li, and music. And Confucius got a major part of his revenue from the donations of the scions of those high nobles. And because of that, he was not too on a tight budget, if you want, okay? Because, and he had the donations from his rich students. And when he was Minister of State, between 505 BCE and 500 BCE, he had a revenue of a Minister of State. It was a brief moment in his life that he was relatively wealthy, if I may say so. The other thing is that for the people having passed through the school of Confucius, you have the scions of those nobles that who will go back to their usual aristocratic life, okay? After having learned music, archery, arithmetic, reading, and so on with Confucius, and forming the character also, of course. And since Confucius was a especially skillful teacher, they would keep lifelong relations with him, most of them. For the humbler students coming from the people, from the commoners, or from the same level than him, the gentry, they were the brightest of them would have some charges at the court, and the most outstanding of them were capable to be private administrators for the nobles or having a position at court. Let's not forget that at the time, the condition of the peasantry was not easy at all. So if a commoner got some education by Confucius, even if he did not get a position at court or as a private administrator for a noble house, which is very rare, okay, if he's not from the gentry at the start, the education that Confucius gave to him was something extraordinary, because by that education, he was elevated to a social station that the ordinary peasant did not have access to. So even if he did not gain money or social advantages because he was from a peasant origin, nonetheless, having received that education, transformed his life forever and in the good direction, and he would transmit it within his family for the next generation.
Thank you very much, Jason, followed by Mon.
Yeah, I just like, okay, that's my hypothesis. Okay, so because since we don't know the 2,500 years ago what's going on, the relation between Confucius and his disciple, I think in this way, based on my reading of Analects, I think Confucius and his student more like a political party in today's sense. They are looking for job. Okay. In another way, you can say Confucius want to sell his idea, okay, to fix this world. Okay. So let's put it this way. If we talk about political party, probably you think about Donald Trump, but it's not. You talk about like a high virtuous person, okay, and bring a group of people. And they travel around. You can say they want to find a job. You can say they want to make more money. But actually, Confucius probably want to sell his virtuous idea to save the world. Let's put it this way. So this relationship between Confucius and his disciple, it's probably they don't pay tuition. They only pay symbolic tuition. But some students are very rich. They probably finance Confucius' trip. And some students were poor, like Ziyuan, okay, Confucius will pay him, okay, to do the work. So I think that kind of a communal society, they travel around, they have the same idea to do. If you read, I think in this chapter and this book and the previous book, Confucius constantly talk about who can do this. He can do the administration. Zilu can do the military commander, right? So Confucius kind of sell his student, place his student to some position and comment on what's your work. So in my understanding, if I piece up all this one, their relationships are more like a political party. Okay, so
yes,
on the very first book 1 and the chapter 1, right? Confucius said, usually people translate as a lot of friends coming from far away. Is that happy? But my translation will be different. I think that they should read a lot of party members coming from far away, because the word they say peng, okay, peng doesn't mean in that time doesn't mean friend. That means the people with same idea. So he's talking about people with the same idea from apart. Is that happy? So I think that's a Confucius idea. So it could be different than most of our traditional interpretation, But that's my understand. And I know some a scholar have the same idea. That's not my invented, because I constantly follow one professor, Professor Fu from Taiwan University, and that's he is talking about. So, and I agree with him. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to take 30 seconds. Let's not forget that in the West you have something similar. Okay, if you look at Plato's disciples, or Epicurus or Aristotle, the word in French is scolac. Okay, scolaque meaning the chief of a school. Okay, and it's a community, as Jason said. Okay, inside that community you have the chief, which is the chief philosopher, Plato or Aristotle, for example, and you have administrators who will organize the big machine. Okay, and as with Confucius, in the case of Plato and Aristotle, all of those people had political ambitions, and Jason is perfectly right. Okay, because they wanted to improve the society by influencing the rulers.
Yeah, that puts things into context for me, and I appreciate Jason's example of a political party, and I was actually, my mind immediately went to the idea of Plato's Academy or something like along those lines, that where you were going, and you, as you had mentioned last week, or to the idea of creating gentlemen, but creating statesmen as well, and that this is a way of not only educating society, but also instilling the values that are going to govern society for an ideal society. And I think these verses in particular start to highlight even the financial aspects of that. It goes a little bit beyond the ritualistic thinking that we've covered in the past, and the importance of education of itself, not just, maybe virtues for virtue's sake. So this gives me a little bit more context, and I appreciate that. Aman.
I think everything said so far is absolutely on point. And I'm trying to track all the thoughts I had attached with the discussion so far. The thing I have to, excuse me, always return to is one of the seminal piece of advice I had when studying this, talking about these ancient writings from this period in China. The thing my professor always emphasized: these texts were written for war. You are looking at a period of unbridled, unprecedented warfare that is just running rampant through the land. People's ideas were not just sort of fanciful or pie in the sky. They were very actionable, very meant to be, you were meant to do something with them to end this turmoil. And Confucius was very partisan in this way, and what Jason was saying, as like a political party. They had a platform. Their platform was education. Education for anyone who showed the slightest inclination towards it. This was very different because even into the modern age in China, but especially all the way into all through empirical China, there wasn't anything like an intellectual property right. What you had was a sort of intellectual cloistering. Ideas and knowledge were closely guarded as being only the providence of a certain teachers or certain schools, and you didn't disseminate broadly and widely. Most of the education these students would be getting was the type of education aristocrats were granted, Confucius' peers. He was radical because he was going to share that broadly and widely, which was a huge violation of that sort of idea that the knowledge had value because it was so compartmentalized and so specialized to just the rarefied few. What Quan was saying about those sort of social boons that came from gaining this education. They weren't as formalized necessarily in Confucius time, but they became more formalized throughout time. One dynasty later into the Han Dynasty, if you were to sit the exams and have any measure of success, what would happen would be you would be exempt from corporal punishment. In other words, you weren't going to suffer from trial by torture, for example. You were exempt from coolie labor, which was something everyone in the Chinese Empire was subject to. But if you had any sort of measure of success, that didn't apply to you. And even if you weren't able to land that official government job, you were granted status, especially amongst your immediate neighbors, your village, your hamlet, your family. You were the educated person there. You were the big man in the village. You were who people turned to. And so you sort of gained a clout that you couldn't gain through any other means. This became more institutionalized and more formalized. And after Confucius' time, the first requisite was going to be you had to be an expendable child. And what I mean by expendable is we didn't have to turn your labor back into the farm. We had enough kids, we could let this one study in order to gain that sort of merit. But at Confucius's time, you could kind of opt out. The world was in enough turmoil that with your family, expecting you to work on the farm and you only have one other sibling and we're going to break our backs. Yeah, but I've got to go do this because this is my only pursuit to not only improve my station and our station, but this entire world station, because you can see it falling apart around our ears. So I just wanted to offer those in context with the conversation at hand. I think it's very poignant, it's very apt, but hopefully that gives a little extra shading.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Really quickly, when did you mentioned the Imperial Exams? Like, when did that come into being? Did that?
Those begin in the Han Dynasty. So
wait, okay.
Up a few hundred years, but not extremely far. We're talking maybe 800 years from the time of the Analects, which sounds like forever from our perspective. In Chinese history, 800 years, their bathrooms. That's nothing. That's nothing at all. They weren't widely used. They weren't as prevalent as they would become later in Chinese history, but they did get institutionalized at that point. And those sort of societal perks, those sort of recognized, these are the things that will come with it, came right at the same time. And they endured throughout Chinese history.
Fascinating. Quan.
I would like to give some chronological watersheds, okay? Confucius died in 479 BCE. The Chinese Empire was created in 221 BCE, meaning the feudal order ended in 221 BCE. However, the administrators were still named from the noble families, even if a certain meritocracy was taken into account, okay? Because the principality which created the Chinese Empire, the Qin principality, which gave to China its name, Qin, China, created a kind of meritocracy, 18 degrees, okay? But the peasants were allowed to enter that meritocratic system, but they were not allowed to go higher than the 9th degree, okay? Except for very exceptional officers from peasant origin, because they existed, but they were in the minority. To go above the 9th station to the 18th station, you needed to be born into the aristocracy. And there is another trick. If you were born into the aristocracy, at your birth, you were given the 6th station automatically, okay, without doing anything. So there were some injustices, but it was a beginning of a meritocratic system. And because that principality precisely created the Chinese Empire in 221, that meritocratic streak stayed in China. During the Han Dynasty, as Ammon said, there was some exams inspired by the meritocratic system, but it was open most of the time to the minor branches of the aristocrat or of the gentry. There were peasants who were accepted in that system, but they were exceptions, okay? It was not systematic. The first time in the Chinese history where everyone were accepted, provided that person have learned the classical Chinese education, of course, was under the Sui dynasty, who was created in 581 AD. Okay, and that dynasty did not last very long, maybe 35, 40 years. And after, you have the Great Tang dynasty, which lasted almost 300 years, between 618 to 907. And I would say that, but still, the Tang meritocratic system were still quite aristocratic pro, meaning that most of the candidates were still from the nobility and the gentry. And I think that Ammon mentioned maybe half an hour ago that it was from the Song dynasty that we truly have a meritocratic system open to everyone but everyone, okay? So it was during the last 1,000 years that the Chinese meritocratic system was truly fully implemented. So the Song dynasty started in 960 AD.
Thank you for Quan. I think that, again, all of this is one of the things that I have found with the Analects, and the most important things is to really have the context by which these passages are written. It's without it, it's very hard to grasp the depth of their meaning. So this dialogue that we're having, and we've had in the past, is
With it is still hard to grasp the depth of these text meanings.
Exactly. It is a challenge. So I think that having this understanding as to what Confucius is actually doing and what he's going through, and the foundation that he's laying for things like education, and even just some of the virtuous acts, or the virtue ethics that he's laying the foundation for. It's important to see the environment for which he is actually operating in, who his students were. He talks a lot about his students. So having all this, Quan and Jason and Aman, that the information that you're providing us will allow us to really move forward and with a greater understanding of the rest of the book. So thank you. And James, do you have any comments?
I think Kara has a hands up for a while.
I'm sorry. Who?
Miss Chara?
Yeah, Miss Chara. Do you wish to comment, Miss Chara? You said you were applauding.
I saw her.
You did put it
for a while. So.
She put a exclamation point, and then I messaged her that she was next, and then she messaged
okay, sorry.
That so that she said yes, I'm just applauding.
It was a heartfelt exclamation point.
Yes.
For Ammon and Quan Li. Yeah.
She said I thought I was clapping. Okay. So we'll move on.
I was going to comment though.
No, James and then Brian.
Okay, so yeah, what I noticed was in the discussion, that was great. The history and everything of the system was very, very informative. I still hold on to the idea that Confucius was a little bit revolutionary in his social conception. He understood that you don't automatically give more wealth, add more wealth to rich people. You add wealth to the people who are distressed and need it. So that's what he makes the comment, what a superior man helps the distressed does not add to the wealth of the rich. And that would mean that he doesn't think it's exactly appropriate to give more than a fu or a yu to Ran's mother. But of course, it looks to me that Ran goes overboard because it's his mother, right? Did I get that? Did I interpret that correctly?
No, not his mother. Okay, Gong Xihua's mother. Remember that's very confusing. Okay,
Yeah.
Gong Xihua is the person who traveled to the state of Qi. Mr. Ran tell Confucius, we should give Gong Xiran's mother some money.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Sure.
that's not Mr. Ran's mother. Give Gong Xihua's mother.
Right.
And it turned out Mr. Ran gave her more than Confucius allowed.
Right. And this is what I see. I think all through like you said, Joseph, all the way through so far, all the way through the Analects, is that Confucius is ready to champion the idea that wealth is supposed to be added justly to the most needy, and then to the highest ranks after that.
So we can say Confucius'
Is-
justice system is not like from each according to one's ability to each according to one's need, right? So basically it's for each to according to one's need to each. So he pay how much depend on how much you need, not how much you contribute.
Well, that's what it means, according to his need. I think people misunderstand socialism. They get biased because of that idea. I think it's exactly right on. If people need a house, they should have a house. If people need money, they should have money. Now, if you don't do that, things might still work out very well, as a matter of fact, if the country is rich. But if the country is not rich, then as a matter of fact, if the country starts becoming exceedingly poor, then you have terrible, terrible results.
The one impression that I'm getting, and we'll come to Brian in a moment, is just it almost even more than your basic needs is that education is actually more important than almost anything else. So that is actually something that is very important. Like that, yes, I need some, we need a place to eat, we need food and things along those lines. But, the first and foremost, you need to have an understanding of the world. And I mean, this is kind of the impression I'm getting just based off of the very low tuition, this idea that it's just an offering, that I'm coming here because I'm interested and I want to learn. And I know that this is going to lead to a better life as well. But yeah, I mean, that's just my impression. Brian, do you want to?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wow, I had second Joe's comment about the wonderful context we've received, and it just strikes me that we're looking at it retrospectively. We're understanding and expressing all the wisdom and benefits of the Confucian system, but and then I think to some extent that those benefits and wisdom are captured by or are evidenced by the fact that it did catch on finally in a big way in the for everyone in the Song Dynasty. But I do have a question that it strikes me, and this is taking advantage of this broader discussion to ask it, that there needs to be a receptiveness also to these ideas, even at the highest levels. And I'm trying to understand what was the appeal of the Confucian system? Was it, and that might be obvious or it might be difficult to answer, I'm not sure, but was it the establishment of the meritocracy, or does it go beyond that? Well, first of all, I guess there's a need for bureaucracy. It'll be staffed in as a meritocracy. But beyond that, some of these policies that are expressed by Confucius or embodied in Confucianism, as we've discussed this evening, were those also seen as instrumental or advantages in this propagation of Confucianism?
Yeah, I would like to give a try to answer to that very complex question.
Okay, Aman, if you don't mind, or yeah.
Okay, I think that at the core of Confucianism is truly the creation of the gentleman. Okay, that gentleman, of course, is invited to contribute at the political level, but it might happen too that that gentleman would not contribute at the political level, because and it might sound a little bit strange, okay, but the ancient Roman ideal resembles incredibly to the ancient Chinese ideal of the virtuous man, okay, because the Latin word virtus means etymologically the strength of a true man, okay, of an upright man. And at the core of Confucianism is the teaching of the Zhou royal house for its aristocracy, okay? And I would like to remind that the Zhou royal house started in 1027 BCE, according to certain historians, and in 1046 BCE, okay? So it's one generation of difference. Most historians accept now 1046 BCE and ended officially in 256 BCE, meaning almost 2 centuries and a half after Confucius' death. But that Zhou royal house truly ruled between 1046 BCE to 770 BCE, meaning during about 275 years. And those kings created an education for the rulers from their family and their aristocracy and some of their retainers. And Confucius received that legacy and transmitted that legacy. So let's not forget that, and here is the major point that I would like to offer. I'm sorry that I took 10 minutes to go to the center point. Confucianism is not only a school for future administrators. Confucianism for the ancient Chinese is the essence of their religion, okay? Meaning that if you are a gentleman, you are the channel between the heavenly principles and the human earthly society, okay? So you have a what I call the epistemological journey, okay, that I always make the rapprochement with the allegory of the cave from Plato, chapter 7 of his dialogue, The Republic. Because if you read Confucius and you read Plato, it's the same epistemological journey that is offered, okay? So that is truly the core of Confucianism. And the rest, meaning the school for young gentlemen so they can evolve in polite society without incidents. It's only a minor branch. And the fact that Emperor Wu of the Western Han Dynasty chose in 136 BCE Confucianism as the state doctrine, and more important, as the state religion. Okay, the fact that Emperor Wu of the Western Han Dynasty chose in 136 BC Confucianism as the state doctrine and the state religion is equivalent to the fact that Emperor Constantine chose in 300 and something Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire. Okay, so I take that rapprochement to show you that Confucianism is first and foremost a religion, a spiritual way, an epistemological journey before being a school for young gentlemen or a school for future administrators from 136 BCE. In 136 BCE, Confucianism became the state doctrine, but did not stop to be the epistemological journey and did not stop to be the official religion of the Chinese Empire till 1912, meaning on February 12, 1912, the last dynasty collapsed, ending 21 centuries of Chinese Empire and 20 century of Confucianism as state religion.
February 12th was what dynasty? You went out there for a minute.
1912, the Qing dynasty, the last one.
Okay.
1912. And paradoxically, the Chinese Republic has been proclaimed on January 1st, 1912. So for six weeks, you have the Chinese Empire and the Chinese Republic existing at the same time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That gives a whole new angle to actually understanding not only the Analects, but China as we know it. Aman.
I absolutely applaud, Quan, your analysis. I do agree with you in many ways that Emperor Wu's patronage of Confucianism is very comparable to Constantine's patronage of Christianity. I would say there were some minor differences. It's a little dangerous to parallel these exact in our mind because there was a couple of pragmatic differences, one of which was the sort of that window between the end of Confucius in his life to Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi and the consolidation of China as one empire. These ideas continue to argue between Confucianism and what we now term legalism or Taoism, or all these ideas were still in conflict. And it was not Confucianism that won. It was legalism that won. Qin Shi Huangdi had a system of legalism that said the spiritual concerns, the concerns of virtue, absolute nonsense. Focus on rewards and punishment, keep it to that, make it public, make it applicable to everybody, and you can run you can unite an empire. And he was right, you can unite one. You can't run one that way. It's really hard to keep any sort of administration gears turning with such absolutist views, which is why that the emperor who united China also had the shortest dynasty of all of China. It was like 13 years, and that's it. But that was enough to consolidate. When the Han dynasty rose and the proclamation that Confucianism would now be our state religion and our state sort of virtue and guiding star, it was for polemic purposes as much as it was out of principle. It was a rejection of this legalist draconian sort of structure that had united China. They basically said, we're doing away with that. We're going to have an administration predicated on virtue, on decent gentlemen running it. And then they kept the administrative rules of legalism anyway. It just was a kinder, softer face of legalism in Confucian drag. That was what really kind of went on there. But the ideals of Confucianism, because it centered self-improvement, because it centered learning, all the learned people of the empire continued to go back to it. It spoke to them because it's like how every writer writes about a character who's a writer. They just can't escape the narcissism of, hey, they're talking to me. And so the scholars who read Confucianism saw Confucius writings and said, hey, he's talking to me. And it stuck. It really did in that way, in an underground way that bubbled up over time to a critical mass, to where you had the largest literate population on the planet in China for centuries, because that value of learning was imparted from Confucius in his writings to the Confucians who followed him. So I do think there are some differences there, because that, compared to Constantine's adaptation of Christianity, kept that within the guise of a noble class, of a erudite class, and didn't disseminate it amongst the population at large. They were allowed to perform the rituals, but nobody's going to learn to read the Latin. Whereas Confucians were like, hey, have you learned how to read this? Let me teach you. It's really valuable for you to learn to read this. And it just sort of virally marketed itself that way. So there are slight differences, but yes, I think that was an excellent sort of contextualizing or explanation of how Confucianism got its roots in and then exploded everywhere. And China's success as a model made everybody in the neighborhood ape China. So whether you're talking Korea, Vietnam, Japan, they all adopted Confucianism because whatever they were doing was working. We should do it too.
Thank you.
Really quickly, just one thing is that the reward and punishment, the idea of running an empire with a legalistic approach, isn't that kind of what is being instituted today?
There are still places you'll see legalistic tendencies, especially smaller countries like Singapore is notorious for, jailing you if you spit gum on a sidewalk. And the idea is, if the punishment, there's actually an expression, I believe it's Han Feizi, who said,
right,
there's a way you could get some famous burglar to not pick up a bar of gold if he saw it in the middle of the street. And he said, if that gold was molten, he's not picking it up. And your rewards and punishment should work the same way. It should be intrinsic, implicit, and so excruciating as to deter the person from wanting to pursue whatever the means is. That was the philosophy that the Qin adopted that led to the unification of China. And so it was absolutist types of punishment, severe, but they were publicized. The rewards and punishments were like laid out in a plaque in the middle of Times Square and said, this applies to everybody. And if we catch you doing it, this is what happens. So it's a simple formula. If A, then B. There's no mitigation. There's no mercy to this justice. It was ruthless, but it worked.
Is it sustainable?
No,
It was
it's
sustainable,
not sustainable
for 13 years.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. That's a very important point.
You can seize power with that, but you can't maintain it. That's
Okay.
the sort of reoccurring lesson of China, is that you can become very draconian and very fierce and seize power in that way, but that will never be a successful formula for maintaining it.
Yeah, but I would like to jump and say that Joseph, you are very right, because Eastern Asian countries, China the first, is truly a creation of a subtle mix, of legalism and Confucianism. And everything, when a Westerner read or learn things about China and it looks a little bit scary, it's the legalist dimension. And when it looks noble and lofty, it's the Confucianist dimension. But it's a very subtle mix between the two. And China, for example, nowadays, is a country run by a mix of legalist and Confucianist principles. And Japan too, the only difference between Japan and China, I would dare to say, that Japan has been industrialized a century before, and China has been late in the industrialization. But at the core, it's still a mix of legalist and Confucianist attitudes.
Thank you, Juan. So James.
Yeah.
Thanks
Okay.
for your patience.
Yeah, I'm very opposed to this idea of mixing Platonism with Confucianism. I don't think what happened in China was at all based on Plato's ideas, and it certainly isn't a religion. It's respect for the religion. There's respect for the ancestor worship that was going on, and the seasonal rituals and celebrations. There's the idea of being consonant with the ruling meritocracy and the rulers. So, and because the punishments were too severe, what could happen if the young students were to go outside the system would be excessive. So that's not a religion. That's just coercion. So I don't agree with this idea of Plato's principles being imposed in Japan by Emperor Wu. I think that's kind of a mistaken, kind of like correlation. Yeah, I mean, as far as religion goes, Confucius was very conscientious about the existing religion in China of his time, and he taught his disciples to be equally conscientious of about the observances of the religions that were being practiced. Thanks.
Thanks. Quan, you may have something to say, but Aman, you have your hand.
I guess maybe I would like a clarification from James. What do you mean that the punishment would be excessive for the students? I don't understand that part.
Well, if they went outside the law. Not excessive. Yes, I meant that the punishment would be as severe as any punishment for anyone else. In other words, this was coolie law, I think you said. So if this is, I think people are punished, they're punished. I don't know if they were just given like a stick on the knuckles or what it was, but the idea is that if you go outside the system, if you act disrespectful to your superiors, if you do not do some of these things that Confucius is talking about being quiet in the presence of other ministers. When you're in the presence of ministers, be willing to be the quiet one. Things like that. These are all strategies meant not only to put yourself in a favorable light, but also avoid punishment, in my opinion.
Yes, but you're absolutely right, and that's the legalist framework that has.
No, I mean it existed before legalism. In other words, punishment theoretically exists everywhere, right? Any society, but in the Chinese emperor kind of system, I hypothesize, maybe I've seen too many movies, but I hypothesize that, if somebody could definitely be punished in any society. It happens all the time inside families. Why not inside hamlets and villages and empires? So I don't think punishment began with the legalists. I think it was always extant, just as it happens today in families everywhere on the earth.
You're absolutely right that punishment existed before any theoretical framework. That's absolutely sure. But I would like to say that inside the Imperial Chinese system, the Chinese Empire has been created in 221 BCE, and it used the legalist framework that has been created in the 5th and the 4th century BCE, meaning before the creation of the Chinese Empire in 221 BCE, as the theoretical justification for those famous punishments which existed forever. You're right, you're absolutely right about that. The only thing that the Chinese Empire used those legalist principles and framework to justify their action, their oligarchical or their control action, if you want.
And it systematized it, which was something that was a little different as well. And James, you're right. I threw my hand up when you began talking about religion and Confucianism, because I had to warn everybody, if you ever want to watch a religious scholar's hair catch fire, you bring up Confucianism. It exists in a gray area that can be so just vexing for the scholar, because it doesn't fit in so many of the sort of quaint definitions that are used surrounding religion, but it's hard to escape it in religious studies because there's so much religiosity within a Confucianist framework. And the Analects don't offer a lot of guidance here because they really read more like Dear Abbeys, like greatest hits, which doesn't necessarily mean they're all contextually contiguous, but you can get a flavor of the personality of the person who's writing it, because these pithy little bits of advice have been handed out one after another. And really, if Confucianism reminds me of anything, it reminds me of reading, a cross-section of Dear Abby advice columns, because that's what you have, is Confucius giving advice to different people under different circumstances. Sometimes that advice even seems conflictory, but there is something core there. In Dear Abby's case, there's Abby's sense of decorum. And in Confucius' case, it's Confucius' sense of the junsa, of the rarefied gentleman, the person who gets it so right, and that we can all get there, but it's going to be a long road to hoe. Those are the sort of the themes that continually come out. As far as the patronage goes, you're right. Emperor Wu's decree that Confucianism now would be the guiding principles, like I said, I believe that to be more polemic, because traditionally now, when you mention legalism, and even if you do this in traditional Chinese studies, you'll see people, that's your cue to boo and hiss. Those are the bad guys. We look at them and say, oh, what terrible, awful people. And then the Han came along and brought us Confucianism, and they stopped all that terrible legalism, except you still had trial by torture, and you could still be put to the thumb screws, and you still had these draconian sort of rewards and punishments that were given, but with a kinder, gentler face and a veneer of Confucian virtuists enacting it. But that veneer sunk in, and those scholars started to see that those virtues were absolutely paramount. This is so many hundreds of years after the time of Confucianism of Confucius, that you see a lot of sort of spin-off ideas in the centuries that follow him, where you get Maoists who are like, nope, universal love, this is much better. And one of the theories you were asking about what those punishments were, Mao's name may mean tattoo, because one of the ways to punish somebody could be to brand them. And so they think Mao Tzu may have just been the tattooed master, but now we call him, Master Mao. Han Feizi considered himself a Confucian, or a Ruist, just another one of the scholars, but his bent was towards this very rewards and punishment basis. Shunse died in the wool Confucius, would have said, I'm a Confucian, and believed it, heart, soul, hook, line, and sinker. And it was those like him that started to sort of build the momentum for Confucianism to become this overwhelming pedagogical giant in the East, just dwarfing everyone else. It's weird for me to say this because even while it did that, not all the other schools simply evaporated. Some of them did. There are no Maoists. But there are still Taoists. There are still Buddhists who exist in China, and they get along with each other, not in sort of this, Jerusalem armistice tension, but in sort of a, okay, you see it that way, I see it this way, but we get along well enough now. Confucians could be pretty strident though, especially when the Buddhists came in saying, that's foreign, that's not us, get the hell out.
Religions are going to be religions. I just wanted to say that it was Chuan that brought up religion. He said that the Emperor Wu made it the religion of China.
Yes, because I insist on that. I would like to have 5 minutes for that because it's very important.
You already took a long time. Okay.
And thank you. It's very important because let's not forget that I think that one of the useful way to tackle the question is by reminding everyone that the Chinese classics, and a classic is a book teaching the timeless truth. The Chinese classics are formed by the 4 books and the 5 classics, okay? And let's not forget that the first of the 5 classics is called the Ji Ching, okay? And the Ji Ching is a religious book because the Ji Ching is tackling cosmology, epistemology, and ontology, okay? The fabric of the universal reality emanating as phenomenal reality that we can perceive with our senses and with our intellect. So, as all of you know, Confucianism in Chinese is Rujia, and Rujia means the school of the scholars.
So,
yes, Joseph?
yeah, so actually, we may want to try and get a couple verses in, and then and just get a couple. I hate to interrupt you on this, but I have to be respectful of Jason's translation and time. So,
oh, sure.
Is that okay? I apologize for that interruption.
That's okay. I wouldn't have time to come back later on or during next session.
Yes. Thank you. So I kind of let this go more than usual today, only because I did think it was actually providing us a lot of context for future meetups. And I think that this is actually really kind of important to understand the schooling, some of the other philosophies that it inspired, and then we'll have a little bit better context as to what these. But Jason, do you want to skip to your translation and maybe we'll skip the readings? And
yeah, I just said, I think, do we have time?
Do we have time? I mean,
probably we can.
Well, yeah, what do you want? Do you want to wait till next week?
Probably we should wait for next week.
Yeah, 7, 8, and 9. Yeah, I apologize to everybody, but I thought that this session was actually, for me personally, I thought it was important.
I think this was a good section for this kind of depth of conversation. We're on a new book, and every time we tackle a new book, we've seen we're into a new realm. We went through ritual, we've gone through sort of the master says, we've gone through the ABCs. 6, it starts getting a little deeper and it starts
Right.
getting a little more contextually specific. So it's worth having that context. It's worth understanding the world we're talking in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm in complete agreement, especially when we're talking about even what his approach would be as to our obligations to one another as far as finances are possibly concerned. What his actual, his where did he place the emphasis on education, or was it more on politics? And it seems like it was both, and to a certain degree. So understanding, I think Jason's actually example of it being a political party uh, was very important for me as far as just contextually putting things together as to how the school or the disciples were actually um, what they were doing there. I think that there's a lot that I know that for me, um, it really kind of at least gives me a lot more context to ask questions about the text itself going forward. That's the most important part. Uh, so does anybody actually, Quan, if you want to finish your comment at this point
Yes.
without any objections, but and then we can make some closing comments, Brian, as well. Uh, Regarding just this session and what we've taken away from this session would actually be helpful, and then yeah, we can go from there.
Okay. If it's okay with everyone, I would be grateful to take 5 minutes to finish my comment on the fact that Confucianism is absolutely a religion.
Well,
Okay,
I don't think, okay, well, what I would contest is that Confucius presented it in that light. He presented it in a series of lessons that concerned human mannerisms and comportment and concern. And if you call that a religion, I would argue with you and say that you're redefining religion to suit your particular values.
Yes. And precisely, I think that to define what is Confucianism by only what Confucius is saying is probably a good starting point. But you have to take into account the whole Confucian corpus. And the whole Confucian corpus starts with the Ji Ching, which is recognized, acknowledged since 25, well, since let's say Emperor Wu, since 136 BCE, as the first Confucian classics, meaning that that school of the scholars consider that what is taught and conveyed from that Ji Ching is part of the Confucian teaching and representation of the world. So Confucianism is not only a school to teach manners for the young nobles, so in order that they can move in court society or to become future imperial bureaucrats. That's one dimension of Confucianism. But it's not the core dimension of Confucianism. The core dimension of Confucianism is truly what is conveyed inside the first Confucian classic, meaning a representation of the world with consideration on cosmology, epistemology, and ontology, okay? Which are the branches of philosophy tackling what we would say commonly religious questions. And one thing that is not very well known in the West, but there is it's a revealed religion, okay? Most of the time, people think that the revealed religion is one of the three Abrahamic religions. Confucianism is a revealed religion. Why? Because Confucius claimed to be the inheritor of the wisdom of the Zhou kings. And the Zhou kings themselves claim that they received those wisdom from the ancient sages. And if we go back every step, we will have a certain ancient sage called Fu Si, and that Fu Si receive a text that appear in front of him, brought to him by a magical horse and a magical tortoise. So we have a foundational event which is very similar to a revelation, which Confucius, according to his own words, is only the one who received that legacy many centuries later, of course. But what I want to insist is that often we insist a little bit too much, and not with reason, on the bureaucratic and organizational aspect of Confucianism, which is very true. But Confucianism is not essentially that bureaucratic and ritual school. Confucianism is essentially an epistemological, cosmological, and ontological representation of the universe, having as its center the creation of the gentleman, and the top of the gentleman is called in Chinese a shengren. A shengren is a person who is capable to be at the center of the human universe, making the relation with heaven and earth and the human community. If you look at the Chinese character for sheng, you have an ear, a mouth, and the simplified image of an upright gentleman, meaning that a shengren is the gentleman capable to hear the heavenly principles and capable to express it to the human community. And that is the center of Confucianism, with consequence, ideally, to form statesmen to participate in the administration of the empire. So that dimension is true, but that dimension is only a consequence of the creation of a gentleman, ideally of shengren. Of course, not all gentlemen succeed to become a shengren, but that's part of the ideal.
So I'm going to give Jason 2 minutes to go ahead and offer his opinion as well, and then we'll come
You
together.
can time me for 2 minutes. So.
I'm not going to hold you to it.
Oh, no, I don't think I have to speak over 2 minutes. Okay, so I think so that's a lot of things. That's my suggestion. I think so because Confucius even is an ancient person, and then he has a historical background. He has 2 years. He talked about 1,000 years before him, and we are 2,500 after him. So when we talk about Confucianism, it's very confusing, very confused concept, because it's talking about Confucius, the person, or talking about Confucius, where is he coming from, or what's his influence after that. So I think we need to make it clear, and in my stand here, I only talk about, that's myself, I'm not saying you should not, but I'm only talking about Confucius as a person, okay, and during his time, his teaching. And then, because if you ask people from Han Dynasty, they will tell you different story of Confucius. Talking about later Han, because after the influence of Wang Bi or what the Neo-Taoism, they will tell you another different story. To the Song Dynasty, they have the test system. They will give you another idea. So I just say we have to separate, and then my position is only here. I only talk about Confucius during that time. Otherwise, I think it will go too far. That's my suggestion. And just some advertisement. My Saturday 4 o'clock or 7 o'clock meet up Asian philosophies. We have a lot of chance, and we've been discussed for 1.5 years and non-stop. Okay, we stop for these 2 weeks, this week and the next week. And October 1st, we're going to restart. So we never stop, and we haven't finished the discussion. I just want to say it's a big subject. Thank you.
So this Saturday is,
No, I have no meetup this Saturday and the next Saturday. Yeah.
so you're taking 2 weeks off. Well
Yeah, I have to
deserved.
take off because two of my sisters, they are taking vacation. So I have to do presentation week after week. I say, okay, so you guys take off. I'm going to take off for 2 weeks.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Before I have a PIN and SK, we take turn, right? And I do the probably 2/3 of them. But right now for 2 months, I do it. And then I said, okay. And then Alex is going to do for Chinese calligraphy on October 1st. So,
Oh, wow.
okay, so she's going to do the art and the philosophy of Chinese calligraphy. So that's our new start. We have a female philosopher to do it. It's unusual.
I'm looking forward to it. Very much looking forward to it. Kevin, or Kevin then James.
Yeah, first, thank you. You know, just so many people are gonna thank you. You know, Joe's whole this like today's special day. Like normally we go to 2 or 3 round, right? But I learned a lot. You know, it's the second time I speak here, and thank you, Jason, and also Kwang. Obviously, just Kwang, you wanna you know, speech on a Saturday or even a Tuesday comment is very great. I got a couple of comments. The first one, have you guys remember when we learned Dao De Jing about the Tian? In Chinese, Tian is big. It's like heaven. But if you translate to heaven, it's a complete, don't complete, it's different. But a direct translation is sky. However, if you sky, it's also not capture the meaning. So that's one going back to the Kwang and James, the difference about the belief. I would use belief can capture this religion and Confucius. That's just John's conclusion. I don't waste everybody's time. And you know, for people, if from Kwang, if we support Paul, Kwang, we got like Chinese called 3 religion: Ru, Confucius, right, and Dao, and Buddhism. They now some is in one temple, they hold the 3. So maybe you hear about the vinegar story, right? Different taste. Buddhism maybe no taste. Is sour, and for Taoism no taste, and for Confucius is sweet. So it's a different thing. So if we directly translate, and by the way, I'm going to speak about what I learned from Kwang. He mentioned the word, the China is from Qin. I didn't notice that. Now I start to notice QIN. Actually, I'm going to post it later, which is Qing. And in Western, we try to Sina, SINA or CHINA. It's very interesting. Basically, our pinyin or in Taiwan, I guess the traditional also QIAIN. So it's very interesting seeing capture that. And I remember Jason keeps saying, Confucianism is a kind of political. Like today, Kwang's aspect, yeah, it's emphasize that. You know, thank you guys.
Thank you, Kevin. James.
So I think this theory that that was put in place in the 3rd century was probably, I would call it an amalgam. In other words, if you feel like the Ching is and is kind of in its being epistemological, ontological, and cosmological, and you know, it's not just philosophical. If it happens to ring all the bells of a religion, which I'm not an authority on. I don't really understand. I haven't read Confucius's comments on the I Ching, and I've never experienced any kind of mastery of that book. But Confucius
in the end of October, you will read it.
Oh, thank you, Jason. Thanks. I'm really looking forward to
He
it.
is going to guide you to read the first Gua Qian, which is heaven. Okay.
Okay, I just don't want
to do
to.
that.
I just don't want to start being obsessed by dragons in my dreams. But anyway, yeah, but this yeah, so they yeah, so the magical horse and tortoise, comparing them to the Garden of Eden, you know, it's kind of like it's kind of cute, but it's not quite a one-to-one comparison. And so I need to be more educated. I need to learn like exactly what Confucius said about the Ji Ching, which apparently, or at least somebody used his name in commenting on the Ji Ching. And so we're talking about like history and quotes when we talk about Confucius. Sometimes we don't quite know what he wrote, what was written for him, what was possibly changed by other scholars. So we have to be careful about literalism. But the one thing that he did talk about a lot was the book of poetry. So I think we can definitely say that he revered the book of poetry and understood it as a important secular contribution to the Chinese culture. And perhaps it covers religion as well, which is a good thing. So Confucius understood and recommended proper observance of the religion of his time. But then what Emperor Chu did could have been fairly dramatic. I don't deny that. So yeah, I need to educate myself in that particular religion, but I'm pretty strict about what I would consider a religion. I could consider Buddhism a religion, which a lot of Buddhists don't. So you know, so I'm willing to debate those issues. Thank you.
I know, Man, you have your hand up, but Brian's been waiting. I missed him, so if you don't mind if he could go really quickly. Thank you.
I'm gonna. I'd be very eager to hear what Aman says, but I wanted to give a shout out to Jason because I would not. First of all, you know, I do like his translations on the Tuesday, but also I would not have understood this discussion tonight at all if I'd not have the Saturday Asian philosophy. So I'm very grateful for that. In addition to Aman and Kevin and James and Kwan, this has just been, for me, a fabulous experience. And I do appreciate the discussion of the context. The fact we've gone into it rather extensively this evening, but wow, I got so much out of it. I'm very, very grateful.
Thank you. And thank you for saying that, because I have notes as well. And for me, this is one of the most, when I was reading the Analects, and the one thing I realized I had to do was not only get the context, but it was just something that I had to understand the individuals that he was actually speaking to, the students that he was speaking to. So I even got a profile on the students as a way of actually starting to try to understand the Analects. And all of this is context for me. And even then I looked at multiple translations, and the translations vary pretty, you know, there's a pretty big variation in each of the translations that I've read as well. So all of this is necessary in order for me to make some semblance of what Confucius said, why he said it, and what it means today. So Aman.
I want to thank everybody. Great evening conversation. I will be running, and I'm sorry if I look distracted. I got video of my grandson and had to sit and ooh and ah. I don't want to reconcile anything. I want to leave a little tension in the air, but I do also want to say I agree with you, Kwan. I do believe in Confucianism as a religion, but I also agree with you, James. I don't think it has to be. And the example I would give would be Judaism may be a religion, but to be Jewish does not make you necessarily religious. Confucianism may not have to be a religion, but many Confucianists are religious Confucianists. And I think there was one very Western chauvinistic flaw that's made in the analysis, and that is trying to set Confucian's religious credentials on orthodoxy. We have a penchant in the West to treat the truth of a doctrine or some written text that reveals truth as the hallmark of religion, orthodoxy, true text. Most religions in the world are not orthodoxic. They are not even concerned with a doctrine. Most are orthopraxic. It's the practice you do that makes you that religious. That's been the true mantle of religions most of the world over for most of human history. It's just those that have an orthodoxy got to set the terms of what we later came to define as religion or not religion. And so for this, I invite you just to think of it as it can be both true that Confucianism is and is not a religion, and Confucianists are both religious and non-religious practitioners, all in the same guise. I'm excited for next week. I do not, if I am in a suit and tie, like I said, something has gone horribly wrong next week, but this is my orientation week, so I'm rushing off to bed to do it again tomorrow. I will see you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Aman, for
Right,
as
bye.
always.
Mamanzo.
It's an honor to have you here. So, if there are any closing comments, I want to
Thank you, Chuan, for sharing your knowledge of Chinese history with us. I think it was very helpful for everyone.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
Thank you, Jim. The challenge. It's good, you know.
No, I think this has been an excellent discussion on a number of levels. I thank Jason for his patience because we didn't get to the translation, which is actually.
No, I don't have
fear.
to. You don't have to go to the translation. You know.
but no, I'm sorry that we didn't move along.
There's a lot to talk about. That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Probably we should organize a reading and the discussion, 2 sections. That probably would be more, probably another way to look at.
So do all the readings and then
All the
just-
reading and the section 2 is discussion. Probably that would be another of all the, because I realize it's because we cannot expect everybody in the same level. Okay, so I think the best way probably would do is we probably need to talk this way. Probably first hour we do is focus on the text, and then second part, okay, we can kind of free discussion, because it's a lot of thing we need to do, because I've been running the Asian philosophy for 1.5 years. Okay, yeah, 1.5 years non-stop, and I realized it's before I always run 3 hours, because 2 hours discussion and then we always extend another hour. So it is too many things to discuss. But right now I limit it to 1 hour, 2 hours. So I think the way we probably can do is we focus on the text and the Confucius teaching, and then some further discussion like history, the Confucius based on Ji Ching, that's also important part, and how people later study Confucius, how do they view it? That's also very important subject. But I think probably we can separate as 2 sections. Just a suggestion.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear Kevin, Brian,
Yeah,
regulars.
we can
on this
use,
idea.
because if one thing from Sri Lanka, he organized a meeting, very excited sometimes, because he is, why don't you break up the room? Let's use, then fragment Joe, you're going to charge your time. Let's say in 1 hour, first hour, half hour, we do the reading and the Jason said, another half, no more than a half hour. We either do breakout room or it's 10 o'clock, we cut off at least one more round. That's way, or do breakout room, you try different things. These like quants aspect, that's very, useful too. For example, it's hard to grab people where also James, see, he got another aspect. So if we have breakout room, bring the point, like he bring the question or comment. So a little bit, I would say diverse. If this way, Jason way, could be keep the things simple, but we lost the meaning. What's the meaning? If you imagine you read 6, now it's 3, 6, you got, hard to catch up. Thank you.
So
you mean-
there's
Tim,
two
you
things.
say read the 6 and then break out, right?
No,
Yeah,
I mean
he-
3, still 3. Then we can do break up, or,
So here's my only concern is that what I found with at least the Bhagavad Gita is that we've been able to leverage Yogeshwar's knowledge about each passage, and by reading all the passages at once, sometimes it becomes overwhelming. So I think it is to make a comment on 9 or 10 passages at once. And what I think that the value is here personally is getting everybody's input on a series like one of 3 passages, which all that does is put the onus on me to keep it moving forward more than it does anything else. I think that that's really the key, that I need to fill that role, because I think that having James or Quan and Brian like kind of look at the Analects in each with 3 or 4 passages at a time is the most efficient way of getting their thoughts out there and getting their thoughts on a particular topic. And so the onus is going to be obviously on me, just to make sure we're at, hey, look, we're at 35 minutes, short of it leading into a something profound. Let's keep it, let's move to the next section, because what I would like to do is crowdsource as much knowledge from the individuals about the specific passages as much as possible. That's the goal, in my opinion. But I'm
Yeah.
open to anything.
One more. For example, today's time spending. For example, every time we're going to use, we could use a regular way. Joe, you're going to control time. Let's say every person have no more than 2 comment about one wrong. Then later on, from the Quan, he got so many knowledge and background. Later on, after finish, either 2 round or 6 passage or none, that will be free time. Basically, kind of talk freely and more broadly. We kind of use it, yeah. Go ahead.
And what I can do, and that's the other job of a moderator, is to make sure that it stays on point. So some of the stuff that we went over today, I could have brought us back, and I didn't. And the only reason why I was selfish, because I was getting so much good information from Quan and Ahmad.
We also
that
learned,
I
not
was very,
not just you, man.
it was very selfish of me in a way, because I was getting this and I'm taking these notes, and it's giving me, I mean, again, Jason, your explanation of the using the parties as an analogy, Quan, going into the idea of the schools, but even not only that, the religion aspect of it, and then you're back and forth with James a little bit, understanding that dynamic. It provides for a richer experience when I'm reading the Analects. Then I can start to remember these conversations and arrive at my own personal conclusions to a certain degree. Maybe not about the religious, but about other things anyway.
Joe, I think that we don't need to change. I just remind me that's probably our discussion at the first 2-3 section. Remember
Yeah.
when we just started,
Yeah.
we go this way, right? Because the
Mhm.
people start to ask what's 孝, what's 人, right? And we talk about all over the place. That's why we implement this 3-group method, right?
Right.
So we talk about every 40 minutes we move on. Every 40 we move on.
Yeah,
Because
stick on time.
yeah, and then we work for a while, and then well, because the contribution from Kwan, because he bring up the new dynamic, and that's a new knowledge we need to observe. And I think that we have to, probably we don't have to change. We just have to keep our perfect tradition. so
How you change our rules?
I haven't spoken yet about this. I don't know. Can I interrupt now?
Please.
yeah, please.
There's two things. One is that focusing on the contents. I think that you've got to understand that there has to be a little bit of focus on the contents of the reading. But and also keeping the comments somewhat short. In other words, maybe not longer than 2.5 minutes usually. What I noticed, it's strange for me about the meeting, and maybe it comes because of your experience with the Bhagavad Gita
Bhagavad Gita,
meeting, is that Aman always speaks before everyone else, and he always speaks for as long as he likes. So I don't think there's anything, I didn't really feel there was anything terribly wrong with that idea, but we have like the possibility that people could actually compete in terms of their scholastic, knowledge. And I was always wondering what the reason for that is, why Aman always speaks before everyone else. Was that
well,
part of your agreement, Jason and Joseph?
No, yeah, okay. Okay. Aman is special.
Right. He's
Okay.
part of the translation. He
He worked with me on the translation.
yeah.
He worked with me on the translation. So basically, he got the ownership, put this way. Okay. So and he do review for that. And James actually, okay. Well, basically, I think that's the reason. But I think back to I like to hear what Brian think. But
Yeah.
I think that our old system probably is fine. Remember at the beginning, okay, we have people keep talking about what's the run, and then we always go over it. And I believe Brian and James, right? Right now, you probably clear on the meaning of xiao and the run, right? After
Yeah.
a few weeks, right?
Yes.
I hope so. Okay, otherwise probably have to. That means we didn't do job. But anyway, at the beginning, I remember James probably also asked a lot about the new concept, this virtual, and then later on, I assume you understand the not give up. I assume. Okay, so so I think it's the same thing as a lot of history, whether or not it's a religion, whether or not it's something. Probably we will figure out, after 2, 3, or 5, or 1 or 2 months, people will start to figure out. And then the same subject we can keep repeating on almost every text we read. I think that would be the ideal situation.
The other thing I
Jason,
noticed, go ahead.
I have a short question for Jason.
Yeah, please.
Is the great learning, the Tashui, part of the reading session in the future?
Oh, no, I already do it at the beginning of this year, because I think the 大学, the great learning, is the most important. So I do it on the beginning, after Chinese New Year, the start of 2020, I start the great learning.
Okay, so it's already finished. Oh,
I will finish it later, but I will repeat because I go through right now. I'm finished to the Tang Dynasty about Xuanzang. Okay, so going to the Buddhism religions, So that's what I'm doing now, and I kind of follow through the history. Probably take 2 years to finish the whole.
Do you have the intention to go back to the Tashui in the next years, 2023, 2024? Or
However you want to do it.
If you like, you text me, then we can work on the section. If you want to introduce 大学, that would be a great way for you.
Yeah, that's would be share your.
Yeah, that would be fair. I like you to join us too if you want, and then.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh,
you come to one of my section and then see whether or not you like our section, you know, so.
What do you mean by your section? You mean the section where you are doing the the Xuanzan now?
No, I talk about the, well, let me send you the.
I can't find it. You can't talk. Sure, Jason. I can't find it. Right.
Okay, yeah,
I wanna-
yeah.
I do wanna hear what-
Please send it to Huang, yeah. So.
You mean the Saturday sessions, right, Jason?
Yeah, Saturday section,
Basically, research Asian philosophy, right?
yeah, Asian philosophies, yeah.
Okay, Asian philosophy on Saturday night.
On Saturday, your time, 7 o'clock, but I taken off for these 2 weeks, so.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
And
just
it's-
join us, like most of the people here, join us, and you see if you can contribute, then great, yeah.
And it's on the Meetup platform.
Yeah, meet up.
Okay,
Yep.
so Asian philosophy Saturday night. Okay, I will
Yeah.
look for it.
Yeah.
And then, Brian, do you have any comments as to the structure?
Well, I think I agree generally with Jason. I don't think we need any change. There is some variation from meeting to meeting. I wasn't upset or concerned about any of the discussion or how it was flowing today. I thought it was all very excellent and enlightening and inspired by the text we were looking at. I think that, you know, having laid out some of this context, we probably won't need to lay out this context again. Maybe other issues will come up, but I don't think on the basis of this meeting, we need to be changing things. And again, I agree with Jason that there'll be some variation as the meetup flows.
Joseph, I think you just need to consider yourself the world's greatest moderator, and then fill those boots. Yeah.
We already have that. We already have one of those. That's the 52 living ideas. That's
But you could be the disciple or something like that. You know,
No,
young,
sometimes the
yeah,
disciple.
one young or something, huh?
but it's no, this is I enjoyed thoroughly this evening. Quan, I really appreciate what you're bringing to the meetup. It is really, it's special. And James obviously has been a stalwart here, so you know it's and I enjoyed your talk on Saturday as well.
Oh, thank you.
Very much. It was excellent.
Basically, I want to add, it's you back to Confucius and Nietzsche, or it's like Agora, you know, that style. That's something we lack. You know, the Kwang you bring here, especially the James conversation, you bring from, you know, different aspect. We can everybody. When you form a question for some dispute, then you okay, yeah.
Yes, and dispute here has to be understood as the Latin word disputatio. Okay, it's an intellectual exchange.
Yes.
I agree. So, okay, well, I think that's good. I appreciate the feedback. You know, I figured this is a worthwhile discussion on a number of levels, just the feedback that we've gotten and the context that we've got for future discussions. And I think we all have a better understanding of how maybe the format's going to probably be. But you know, I don't want to be too rigid. If there's something that is, you know, at the same time, if we're having a great discussion about something and we're not off topic, then you know, if we get through 2 sections versus 3, then I think that that's okay. So
Yes, I agree.
yeah, so
Yeah, some sections are long, some are short, and some are.
that first one was
descriptive.
long.
Yeah, so.
Today. And the thing that I've really kind of, you know, I've looked at 2 or 3 versions now. And does anybody remember the one that Will had, the translation that Will was using?
Oh, the Korean, the Korean, I don't remember the name. That's the Korean scholar. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably I should ask him again. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to name one American scholar that you guys maybe know, the Professor Robert Eno. Do you know Professor Eno?
I know Eno. Eno has a good translation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I constantly look at his translation. Yes.
Yeah.
Eno is a very good one. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Professor, you know,
Yeah. Robert
Ian,
Eno. Yeah.
yeah, Eno. And you can get his translation for free on the internet. And it's not
Yeah,
a
you just
small
search
reader.
for Eno and then Analect. You probably will see that. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it
He,
came
ga-
up.
he gave
got-
an outstanding translation of the Mencius and of the Daxue too. And also of the inner chapters of the Zhuangzi.
Excellent.
Yeah, I have it here.
Search for Eno is a good one. Yeah. He
Yeah.
has a lot of historical background. I think his reading is the same as mine. So we read it as not a moral teaching. We read it more as against the historical background. I think that's the way he reads.
Yes, but I would like to say that yes, he's very strong on historical contextualization. That's true, but he's taking into account also the epistemological journey, in my language, or the moral development, if you want.
Yeah,
He has
I
he
know
includes
the
his
system of it.
he's like you, Jason. He actually includes his notes.
Yes.
So no, many passages in books. by
Anybody
comment.
read a Gutenberg one?
Yeah, Gutenberg is good too.
And that's free.
Yeah.
So, Joe, I have a request.
Sure.
Actually, you are I think you could be the best sounding board for the people understand Confucius. So I would like you speak more on your understanding
Okay.
on each chapter. I think
Absolutely.
that would be.
I can do that. That's something that actually
I know
can-
you as a good, perfect host, you try not to express yourself much. Okay, you ask question. So, but I think this group's setup is a little bit different. Okay, so I think if you express more on your understanding and your opinion, probably will help, and also will guide the direction
of the discussion.
the discussion. Yeah.
I absolutely will take. I will take that challenge on. So yes, making. I sometimes it's intimidating because we have so many great scholars here, but yeah, I think that's actually it'll be good as far as keeping the discussion on point as well. If I make some comments, brief comments that can kind of guide where people can make follow-up comments and are about specifically the passages themselves, and that way I can guide the discussion a little bit. No, I appreciate that. I'll
I
take
think
that on.
that will help a lot, and the plus is for my own benefit. Okay, so we can find a scholar online and all over the place. So
Okay.
we probably need more is the so-called secular understanding.
No, that's good to hear as well. No, as well, because I should be able to offer a layman's perspective that would actually be able to and that would be part of like what people could comment on. Yeah, I mean that's the most important part, is that it can get people to a little bit more engaged. So I appreciate that. So yeah, I think that's good. All right, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Did you have a comment, James?
No, that just thanks for the meeting.
Okay,
It was
so
good.
Thank
Yeah.
you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Quan, hope to see you next week. And everybody, very much appreciate your time and consideration. And I'll see everybody next week.
Ciao.
And Quan, did you register on Meetup? Because then I can send you Jason's Meetup.
I already. Did you sign up? I sent you.
Yes, you send me the for October 1st. I will
Yeah,
register
you
for
just sign
October
up,
1st.
then you are in the group, and then you will read the note, and just join us and see what you can. How do you think? You know, so that.
Absolutely, I would be delighted to discuss with you guys on October 1st. Ciao.
All right. Take care. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.